Thank you, Seth, for organizing this. What a successful event. It's great to see so many folks. How many of you have property in Florida, by the way? A decent number. Look, when I ran for governor in 2018, I made a lot of promises. I have fulfilled every one of my promises and actually over-delivered. How many people have you ever voted for that over-deliver on their promises? It's pretty rare in this line of business, but one of the things I said I would do is I would be the most pro-Israel governor in the United States, and that Florida would be the most pro-Israel state in the United States. And before I even took office, we had the opportunity for the rubber to meet the road on that, because in late 2018, I think many of you remember, Airbnb had announced a discriminatory policy against Israeli Jews living in Judea and Samaria. And so I announced during my gubernatorial transition, this shall not stand in the state of Florida. We will invoke our anti-BDS law as soon as I take office. And so we did. We took office. First week in office, we invoked the anti-BDS law against Airbnb. And what was the response? Airbnb folded and they changed their policy. And so it shows that when you stand up for what's right, it does make a difference. And then I think the next year or 2 years later, we did the same thing with Unilever and Ben & Jerry's, because they were discriminating against Israelis living in Judea and Samaria. And most recently, we signed legislation overall to kneecap this idea of ESG in our pensions and social credit scores, and what they're trying to do is impose ideology on the economy. Part of ESG scores were being used by Morningstar. They were trying to smuggle in BDS into these credit scores. And so we kneecap Morningstar in our legislation and say, not in the state of Florida, that is not going to happen. And so every time there has been an attempt to stigmatize Israel or to marginalize Jews, we have invoked our policy to fight back. And look, here's the deal. I'm pro-Israel, you guys are. I'm pro-America, you guys are. Not everyone is. Some people have different opinions, and I respect that. But when you single out the only Jewish state in this entire world for disfavored treatment and give a pass to all these other regimes doing horrific things, that's anti-Semitism. When you apply a different standard to Israel, and it's wrong. And we don't allow that to happen. We've also understood that throughout our country, we have seen rise in anti-Semitic attacks, not just against Jews, but I think primarily against Orthodox Jews, or people that have an outwardly Jewish. Maybe you're wearing a kippah, maybe you're doing something else. And so we view that very seriously. Now, we don't have those attacks in Florida like you've seen in New York and some of these places, but we also understand that we got to have a united front. And so since I've been governor, we've done millions and millions of dollars to help with security at our Jewish day schools throughout our state. We're not going to let any of our people just be some piñata for somebody that has an agenda. And so I think that that's been very, very effective. We also understand that with this day and age, it's more important than ever that parents are empowered to choose the best education they can for their children. So we've embraced parental choice in education. We understand that for many parents, including me and my wife, being able to send your kid to a school where you're not only going to get a high quality academic education, but you're also going to get religious education is very, very important for a lot of parents. And so we want to empower them to do that. And so we now have in Florida universal education savings accounts. The money, $8,000, is going to follow the student, so the parent can direct. So you can go to a Jewish day school, you can go to a charter school. A lot of times in Florida, you can even go to different schools within your school district if that's what's best for you. And as we see more and more woke ideology try to infiltrate education, Florida has taken a very strong stand on that. But just understand, when the left says you shouldn't be using tax dollars for someone to go to a religious school. That's religious discrimination, because what they want the public schools to be, they want those to be religious schools too. They just don't want them to be traditional religion. They don't want it to be Jewish, Judaism, Christianity, of course not. But they want it to be the religion of leftism. They want that to be imposed on students. And so if you are somebody who's Orthodox Jew, Roman Catholic, Evangelical Protestant, and you're sending your kid to some of these indoctrination factories, they are trying to indoctrinate your kids with values that are totally contrary to how you live your life. So why is that something that's acceptable? So of course you need choice in education. Parents need to be empowered to choose the best way, but you also need people like me to get the indoctrination out of the public schools. And so we have done that. We've been on offense on that. We believe in parents' rights with respect to education, that parents have the right to direct the education upbringing their children. That includes the right to know and inspect the curriculum that's being used in your kid's school. And unfortunately, there's an effort to jam inappropriate materials into the classroom with very young students. So in Florida, we've empowered parents to blow the whistle when things like that happen. And what have they found? They have found pornography in schools. So think about it. You're in 5th grade, and there's a book, and this was found in Florida, and I can only imagine what they find in New York and California. So they find this book, and it's instructing a 5th grader how to use sex apps on their phone. How is that possibly appropriate? There's also books that have, hardcore pornography, all this other stuff. So we've blown the whistle. Now what the media says is, if an inappropriate book is removed from a school, then that means the government is banning books. Well, I can tell you, in Florida, you can buy any book you want. There's not a single book that's banned, but schools have to make a judgment about what's appropriate to be in a classroom or a library. You can have one book on George Washington. There's 50 others you could have. That doesn't mean you're banning the other 50 because you made the choice to have the Washington book. And it's the same thing with this. If you don't have a pornographic book, maybe you have a book that actually has education value and say. So you have to make decisions to curate all this stuff. So it's a hoax when they say that, but they say it because they don't want to have to defend what they're actually trying to do, because they know it's wrong. They know the parents don't want this. And so we actually did an event in Florida, a press conference, and we called it Exposing the Book Ban Hoax, because it is a hoax. But before I said a word, before I had anybody, parents, say a word, we just played a 3-minute video that just showed what the parents had been objecting to. The news stations that were covering our event cut their feed because they said it was too graphic to air on TV. Well, if it's too graphic for the 6 o'clock news, how is it okay for a 10-year-old school child? So we are very much supportive of ensuring that parents can send their kids to school without having an agenda shoved down their kids' throats. And that's part of the reason we said this movement to put kind of gender ideology and transgenderism in school, where they will actually tell a 1st grader, you can choose your gender, maybe you're born a boy, maybe you're really a girl. That's totally inappropriate to be doing, particularly for these young, impressionable kids. So we did that and said that's not acceptable in Florida. The parents loved it. Republican, Democrat, Independent, they loved it. They want to focus on basic academics. The media didn't like it, the left didn't like it, and we had a business in Florida, in Central Florida, some of you may have heard of, Disney, that didn't like it as well. So Disney went whole hog against the bill. They went whole hog against the bill. And in Florida, Disney's kind of the 800-pound gorilla. I mean, they get whatever they want. They actually had an arrangement until very recently where they controlled their own government, 40 square miles, about the size of Manhattan, in Central Florida, exempt from laws that everyone else has to follow, no accountability, no taxes the way everyone else has to pay. I mean, it was the biggest type of corporate welfare ever. And they opposed the bill. I signed it because I don't subcontract out leadership to woke corporations based in California to stand up for people and parents. But what happened was, after we signed it, they put out a statement saying, we are going to mobilize resources to get this bill repealed in the legislature or struck down in the courts. And, first of all, that's not consistent with your fiduciary duty to your shareholders. You should not be injecting yourself into what's being taught in schools as an entertainment company. And so it was very inappropriate to do that. But then they started having more information come out where Disney executives were on camera saying that it was their intent to jam sexual content into the programming for the youth. And we just think the sexualization of children is wrong. It used to be people would do things in their own lives, adults, but the kids were always considered off limits. Now Disney has an agenda that they're admitting they want to do. So we basically had to make a decision. They're getting all these subsidies and then they're weaponizing that against our parents and our kids. That doesn't work for us. We're not going to be joined at the hip with a company that wants to sexualize children. We are drawing a line in the sand there. So we ended their self-governing status and now make them live under the same laws as everybody else and pay the same taxes. And that's what you have to do. And so standing up for what's right, it's not always easy. They throw arrows at you. But I think what you'll get from me is somebody that if I tell you I'm going to do it, I'm going to do it. If I tell you I have your back, you can take that to the bank. I'm going to have your back in good times and in bad, highs and lows. And as you look forward to what our country needs to do, we need to reestablish an ironclad relationship between Israel and the United States. What this administration is doing is wrong. Part of that is reaffirming our commitment that Jerusalem is the undivided and eternal capital of the Jewish people. The Biden administration, they don't want to keep that embassy there. They know that if they moved it back, they'd get a lot of flack, so it's there, but they don't really like it. They do not acknowledge that Jerusalem shall not be divided. They do still want to divide Jerusalem, so we're not going to allow that to happen, and we're going to make sure that that's very clear. We are also going to be very honest about the history of these lands. Judea and Samaria are not occupied territory. It is disputed territory. Israel has the strongest claim of right on those lands. Those are ancient lands, biblical times, thousands of years ago, ancient Jewish lands. And here's the thing, there was a partition agreement on the table in 1948, but the Arabs rejected the partition. They decided to go to war rather than accept the partition. And so they lost that war in 48. Then they tried another one, and Israel very smartly preempted in 67. So how are you in a situation where you're being occupied for lands you've never had the right to have? So we're going to support Israel in how they want to resolve those lands, but we are not going to kneecap them, and we are not going to countenance American companies discriminating against Israelis based on this notion that that's somehow occupied territory. So we'll be very clear on that, and we'll speak very plainly on that. And I don't care what the United Nations thinks. We're going to do what is right. Look, I think we all know that this country is going in the wrong direction. And it's going in the wrong direction for a lot of different reasons, but we see it every day in cities and in towns across the country. We can just feel it with the country failing on a number of fronts, whether it's the southern border, whether it's the exploding debt, whether it's the rising crime we see in urban areas, whether it's the advent of woke ideology, whether it's something like our military where people are leaving in droves and the recruiting is low. So we've got a lot of work to do. And I'm running for president because I think too many Republicans are content with simply managing our country's decline a little bit better than the Democrats will. I don't want to manage the decline. I want to reverse the decline. And to do that, we're going to have to restore sanity to this society. We're going to have to restore normalcy to our communities. and we're going to have to return integrity to our institutions. Truth must be our foundation. Common sense can no longer be an uncommon virtue. We are going to lead with purpose. We are going to lead with conviction. And I can tell you this, if you help me get the nomination, and I hope you spread the word to other folks, I hope we can do more events in the future. If you help me get there, I'm the only guy who can not only beat Biden, but even more importantly, get into office on day one and be ready to go. We are going to spit nails starting on January 20th, 2025. You're going to have an energetic, focused, disciplined President of the United States who's going to be able to serve 2 full terms. And is going to be able to get this country on a fundamentally better path. And I know that if we're able to do this, it is going to have huge ramifications for our kids and grandkids. I can tell you in Florida, if I had lost my election in 2018, none of you would probably still have property there. It would have gone into the abyss. We were this close to going in a much different direction. I kind of feel similar with our country in 2024. We cannot take another 4 years of what we've seen over these last 2.5 years. And so if we're able to go in, when we're able to go in and win this one, we are going to provide this country with a great shot in the arm. People are going to be proud to be Americans again, and we are going to win big all across the board. So thank you all. God bless you, and I look forward to chatting with you soon.